Hi, I'm Jeff Murrah. I want to welcome you to True Texas History, where today we're going to talk about the Ninth Congress and the annexation of Texas. Now, the reason I chose today to go ahead and address that is because on this day, June 23rd, 1845, the Ninth Republic of Texas Congress met and approved the offer from the United States to annex Texas. Now, this is one of those areas that, although we all know that Texas was annexed, very few people know the story about what happened and what all was involved. And to get a full idea, let's go ahead and consider what all was going on. One thing is people started talking about annexation. It became a very hot issue in 1844 because in 1844 you had the presidential elections not only of Texas, but you also had the presidential election of the United States. Now, in the United States, the candidate one that was wanting to annex Texas, but in Texas, it was Anson Jones who won the election. He did not want annexation. His opponent, Ed Burleson, did. Now, Anson Jones wanted peace with the world and independence, and that was one of the things that he stressed in his campaign. Now, Anson Jones was elected. And negotiations were essentially ongoing concerning the annexation of Texas. The attempts to go ahead and do it by treaty failed. Now, this is one of those things that they don't tell you in the Texas history class because so many people I've come across saying, well, didn't we get brought into the Union by a treaty? No, we did not. When the idea was presented to the U.S. Senate, it was rejected. It was not one of those things that they wanted to go ahead and do. And that happened during Houston's administration, before the new president took office. And Houston got frustrated with the whole thing. Of course, Houston had a temper anyway. And he went ahead and withdrew our ambassador because essentially he was frustrated. He said, this is not going anywhere. We're going to go ahead and stop. Texas is going to go ahead and do it on its own. So Texas went ahead and proceeded with that. Now, to give you an idea what was going on, there was a treaty being negotiated with Mexico, the Smith-Cuevas Treaty, that the English were very involved in because the English wanted to stop the U.S. influence at the Sabine River, didn't want it to go any further. The United States, of course, wanted to push on down to California and gain access to the West Coast. But they knew that they had to go through Texas to make that happen. So you had the negotiations going on for the Smith-Cuevas Treaty, which would have brought peace to Texas. And you also had some of the people that wanted annexation. And they were campaigning very fervently for that in D.C. because the sentiment was actually against annexation. In fact, at one point, Massachusetts threatened to secede from the Union if it was annexed. And there were even political games, like, for instance, they did not refer to the annexation of Texas. It was the re-annexation of Texas because some of these politicians came up with this harebrained idea. Let's go ahead and say that Texas was part of the Louisiana Purchase and we're actually re-annexing it. It's not really annexing it. We're resuming control. And that was the political theory used to try to run this thing through Congress. Now, while we were attempting to negotiate that treaty, the peace treaty with Mexico, there were the efforts to go ahead and annex the for the U.S. to annex Texas. And the offers for both of them came in about the same time, and there was what amounted to a race to see who's going to get to Washington on the Brazos with their offer first. Now, we do run into a problem because the Ninth Texas Congress had already met and adjourned by that time. And so, because the Texas Congress, number one, they were elected to 1-year terms. They were not like the U.S. Congress in terms of being elected to 2-year terms. And the Ninth Congress had already done their business. And so President Jones went ahead and authorized Congress to have an extended session for the purpose of considering the Smith-Cuevas Treaty. The Congress, however, much like most Congresses, didn't do what they were supposed to, and they instead decided to go ahead and table the Smith-Cuevas Treaty and instead take up the offer to consider annexation to the United States. And that was on this day in 1845. They went ahead and approved it. Now, the weird thing is, although they approved it at that point, it was not one of those things that was announced until July the 4th. I wonder why that timing happened that way. Now, one of the mysteries in Texas history is what were the U.S. agents doing in Texas at this time, and who were they bribing? Because there is one theory out there that there were a lot of U.S. agents in Texas bribing Texas officials to vote. And if you read the documents of President Jones, he complains about this, and it's one of those mysteries. We haven't found a whole lot of evidence, but is it beyond Congress to have been bought off? No, of course not. Now, I had mentioned earlier, Texas did not join the U.S. by treaty. No, it was actually by an act of Congress. So literally, they they went ahead and came up with this cockamamie theory of re-annexation. They violate the law by going ahead and doing things by a congressional act. And they went ahead and, because the annexation of Texas was such a controversial issue, they sandwiched it into another piece of legislation that a lot of people wanted, and they were able to get that through. If you've ever heard of something called the Missouri Compromise, that same bill is the one that contained the annexation of Texas. And that's how it was approved in the U.S. House. In the Texas House, it was approved. And supposedly annexation was going to be a done deal then. What about the people? Where was our vote? Well, it didn't occur until probably about, I believe it was October of 1845. After all this stuff was this done deal. And the U.S. had already sent troops down to Texas. So here you have Texas taking action to accept annexation, and troops being sent down here prior to that and stationed, and we supposedly had a free election to decide whether or not we want to be annexed. I don't know what you call free election, but when you're being supervised by U.S. troops, that's not a free and open election in my mind. But that's some of my own biases there. So a couple of things I want you to take away from this. One, we did not join the U.S. by treaty. It was by an act of Congress, actually by acts of both the Republic of Texas Congress and the U.S. Congress. Now, on the Texas Congress side, the Ninth Congress went ahead and did it, although it was supposed to be the 10th. We had already even elected the delegates to the 10th Congress. The Ninth usurped its authority and went ahead and took action that it was not authorized to do. So it raises a lot of questions about the legality, but once again, this is one of those issues. Okay, it was done. Let's just sweep it under the rug. Let's hope nobody goes poking around into the details too much, because it might be an unpleasant thing if they unearth the truth about things and questions of legality on that matter. But anyways, I wanted to go ahead and go over that since this is the day that Texas that the Texas Congress approved annexation. I wanted to go ahead and go through the story because you're typically not taught that in the classroom. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to leave them below or give a thumbs up if you want to. I'm glad you tuned in, and we'll see you next time. Until then, vaya con Dios, my friends. Goodbye.